Enrique. I'm pretty excited to talk about this today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research I've been doing, but what inspired this how to create an HR technology blueprint workshop. This was inspired by a piece I did and just published on Thursday for our Burson research members. But I'm going to just jump right into it if I can. Let's see if I can move my slides here. So I'm going to start just by talking about human capital trends. And really all I'm going to say about this is, you know, 5 of our 10 human capital trends last year called out the role of technology specifically, but they didn't, even though we didn't in the other 5, I think we all know that technology has a huge role in how we actually transform, how we respond to disruptions, and we've been talking about that already. You know, we called last year for the reinvention of really fundamentally everything. I'm excited to tell you guys that the trends report for this year will be out in a month. I'm super excited about it because I think there's some really interesting data there, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. But you know, suffice it to say, we can't do reinvention without technology. Uh, when we ended trends last year, we talked about you kind of got to zoom out and ask yourself some critical questions, right? You got to look ahead and define a destination. And like I said, we called literally for the fundamental reinvention of everything: HR, the organization, the workforce, and that was really where the high impact technology strategy body of work began. Because you know, I kind of call trends the oh my God what, and then the work that we're doing at Burson, kind of the, okay, now what? Now what do we do? So there's some links, and I don't know if we're going to be sharing this, Enrique, but there are links in here to some of the bodies of work that I'm talking about, since we only have a short bit of time today. But the first body of work that came out of that was really a framework to do technology strategy. And this is a little bit about what that is, and there's a link in here as well. But suffice it to say, we really wanted to kind of dig in and figure out who was actually doing tech strategy, and who was kind of doing around the edges of what this framework was. And so I'm going to go on to the next bit, because we had really 4 top findings out of this high impact technology strategy work that we did. And I'm going to focus on the second finding. The first finding was really just HR technology, who has a strategy. And we found out less than a third of the people that we surveyed actually had a strategy. The thing that was really interesting to me, and the reason I wanted to do this workshop, was I don't even know how you formulate a strategy or how you start digging into some of the issues that you have if you don't know what you have. And I would go into organizations, whether I was a consultant or whether I was internal, and I'd ask the question, can you give me a picture of what you have? And what we realized was, you know, very few people run a completely centralized HR technology. All these different changes have been, you know, new leaders, new initiatives, new projects, and more technology kept getting layered in, and nobody had a really clear picture of what systems they had, what processes those aligned to, how data was flowing in and out. And what we realized was very few people actually had a picture. So many orgs don't have a full picture. You know, we kind of defined it so people would know what a blueprint was, and really what it is just a picture of your systems, your data flows, the processes they enable. And so when we realized that so few people had done it, we actually created a tool around how to create an HR technology blueprint. So hot off the presses, it did publish yesterday. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, but I'm going to step you through a little bit of what is in that publication. And just to give you the data itself, that is, you know, we only had 37% of organizations that had an HR technology blueprint. And I'm going to tell you why it's important as well. But you know, kind of keep that number in mind. I will tell you, I think that's aspirational at best. That was the survey results. when we actually went out and talked to people, we actually found out that maybe, let's see, we've talked to 60 companies so far, two companies have had an actual picture of their environment, and which was stunning. We've got 40 more that we're doing, but I do think that it really kind of accentuates the point of, how do you know what to strategize? How do you know what is happening if you can't really get a picture of what you have and what it's supporting? So why do you need a blueprint? Um, 23% of our survey respondents said they were more confident in their ability of their HR technology to meet their needs than organizations that didn't have a blueprint. But I'll tell you that this blueprint is kind of your source of truth for all your stakeholders, especially teams that are utilizing the technology. But it's also a humongous opportunity to have a communication tool around evaluating your current state for whether you have to optimize, enhance, consolidate, whether you want to make investments, anything. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and the real power is in showing, not telling. And I will tell you, when it's time to do that business case for whatever it is, whatever actions you want to take, it's an invaluable tool to help facilitate, those conversations, right? And it's kind of hard not to look at when you have that picture, and certainly if it's a mess, to answer the question why we can't have nice things. So I do think it's great around technology management, governance, investment decisions, anything that you have to do, having that kind of picture to really sit down and think about, okay, what could be the problem here? So, I talked to you a little bit about why. I want to get in and talk about how you actually do it. So the first thing I usually tell people is do an inventory. So identify all the systems that you have. That sounds like it might be easy. It isn't always, especially if you aren't managing your HR technology stack from a centralized basis. It was interesting also, just when we started to do this piece about how to do a blueprint, the question came up as one of my stakeholders was reviewing it. He's like, well, what is an HR tech stack? What is that comprised of? And it really is a loaded statement. So I go through in the piece in a little more detail, but suffice it to say, it really is all of the systems that impact the work that we have to do in HR, but also the work and the reports and the systems that our employees need, that our leaders need to manage their organizations, for employees to get the information they need. So, suffice it to say, there could be a lot of things, right? And they touch a lot of, everybody in every certain way. So it is a complicated step, but it is super critical to just go ahead and figure out what you have as an organization. And you're going to have to be kind of creative, because if you don't manage it centrally, you might have to go out to IT and see what they have. But in the world of cloud systems and SaaS, people can go out and buy different things and point solutions that maybe the centralized HR may not know about, IT may not know about. So you've kind of got to go and inventory, and you have to be creative. And you can do that in interviews. You can go out to finance, ask them, what are we paying for? You might have to go to procurement and see what kind of contracts we have. So it sounds easy, but I detail that step for everybody in this piece, but how to actually conduct these meetings and these sessions and form different alliances with different groups so you can figure it out. A lot of it too is not just asking, right? It's kind of immersing yourself and looking and watching and seeing what people are doing so that you know what they're actually doing, because sometimes they don't even think about it. The next step that I tell people while they're doing this inventory is to actually do a full stakeholder analysis while you're doing it. You're asking everybody anyway what they have, what they use to get things done. So it's an opportunity to kind of create a wish list for the future state. You can capture all the different insights that you might have into designing the future state by asking people, what don't they like? What do they like? What are they kind of meh on? What do they wish they have? What did they used to have that they don't anymore? Or what would they love to do that they haven't been able to do? And really just do, and again, I add questions. What's a stakeholder analysis? So we're doing another tool about, what entails and what is an actual template to do a stakeholder analysis. Another super powerful tool when you're trying to design solutions for the future or communicate those solutions with people, and what your options are. With a good stakeholder analysis, I've always kind of said, okay, if we did nothing, what, how many of our needs do our systems meet, or the data that we have meet? What if we just made some improvements, and what if we gave them everything? And those are kind of your three options that you can give people. So, what do they like, what don't they like? But at the end of the day, you should come out of it with what the organization needs and what people don't need, and that is super important for all of your different personas, and not just in HR systems are not just for HR. They touch every single person. So if you're an employee or a worker or a leader and a manager, if you're the C-suite, what do you need out of these systems to help you do your talent side of your organization? The next step, and the last thing I'll say about that one in terms of the stakeholder analysis and while you're doing the inventory, is think about, again, what people want. That's what's desirable, right? But also think about what's feasible and what's viable. What can you actually build, and what can you profitably deliver on, or at least justify the value in getting. But once you have all of this and your stakeholder needs and you've got your inventory, then you can start to create that visual picture. And that's really what you need to do. That's step 3. Create a simple visual to represent all of your current HR tech structure and the processes they enable. And I'm not talking about full process maps, but what supports talent acquisition? What supports talent management? What supports payroll? What supports comp and benefits? Just so you have that kind of clear schema or framework. And there's different ways that those can look. And again, I think, one of the things that we did with our blueprint tool is to give people a picture of what those different things could look like. But they should reflect those systems, and you should be able to look at it and identify gaps, overlaps, redundancies, bottlenecks, choke points, linkages, all of that. So, be able to ensure that you get a picture of all that. Step 4 is analyze your strategy. Analyze to maximize, I kind of jokingly say all the time, but this is where you really start to frame that design and set up for your strategy. So begin to understand, what your HR strategy is. Remember, go back to what's desirable, but what's feasible and what's viable, because you got to get to that kind of minimum viable product, right? So, we do have a framework I linked to earlier in this presentation that will talk to you around the different aspects of designing an HR technology strategy and how you can use that blueprint to see all those linkages and choke points and everything as you start to design. You have that kind of picture. And the interesting thing about that picture is you can always have a set of questions, revolving around, what should our common language around HR be? What data fields are we collecting? What don't we need? What is the best way to configure all these technology to the processes that we do? And do we even need all these processes? So that whole design and simplification stage. And so in the blueprint tool, you get literally a list of questions that you should be constantly asking yourself as you keep that picture and you keep it updated. Again, it's your one thing, because boy, when a problem comes in, you can look at that picture and go, okay, interesting. I see that we've got 3 different systems doing that. And if there's 3 different systems, people are probably having to pull out information from 3, 4, 5, 9 different systems to do something as simple as figure out merit increases or bonus time. So those are the kinds of things that you can sit back, look at that picture, and start to, kind of formulate what you've got to do, how you've got to go about it. And the last thing that I'll talk about in doing this blueprint is use it. Use it to communicate. So socialize, vocalize. I used, when I would do this work internally with organizations, I would use that in every single conversation. When people see the complexities that they have had to live with, that they didn't even necessarily know, because HR hasn't always let the business know how much they've had to do. They've been asked to do more with less all the time. They've had to kind of bubblegum and band-aid things all together, and they haven't really necessarily gone back to the business and shown the results of all those years of changes, restructuring, new leaders, new technology, all the complexities that that's added to HR, much less their employees and their and the leaders themselves. They know that they have a hard time getting information. They know that when they get information from different people, they get different answers, and so they can start to kind of put those two and two together to answer some of those questions, and all of a sudden it's amazing how much checkbooks come out, right? So as you start to use that to vocalize and use that document whenever you're troubleshooting, whenever you're evaluating new tools, whenever you're trying to implement software or adopt new tools, if you're proposing enhancements or as you are getting new releases from your cloud providers. It's a way to sit back and say, okay, where does this fit in, right? What changes need to be made? Do we already have something that does that? Does this do better than that? And you can start to evaluate things in a better way. It's a great tool to use when you're trying to make a business case for any kind of change. Making changes or decisions related to governance, if you have a governance structure in place around changes or decisions that you need to make around tools, around technology, anytime you need change management. I've even rolled that out when I have a vendor who's come to me and said, hey, you should look at our tools because this is the value that they bring. I pull up that picture and say, where does this fit in? Where does this fit in to this, ecosystem, to this environment? What does it replace? What do I consolidate? What are you suggesting? How do you differentiate yourself from what we have already? So those are all ways that you can use that picture, that blueprint to help have those decisions, those discussions, and whatnot. So I'm going to, because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, I'm going to put my contact information, and Aaron Spencer, who is the research analyst that worked with me on gathering all this data between our surveys and all of the qualitative interviews that we've been doing with companies and still continue to do. Both of us are available for questions. And if you want to see more detail, the links are all in here for those of you who are members. And if you're not and you're interested in getting a copy of the framework, I'm glad to kind of give you a flat version. We use an interactive version for our members, but I can send you kind of that flat copy of what that looks like as well. So given that, Enrique, I don't know if we've got a few more minutes and I can talk more in detail about some of these other things, but I wanted to give just a few minutes for questions if there were any out there. Do we have a way for people to ask?
Yes, on the LinkedIn Live, if anybody has a question, please feel free to post them. I'm going all the way back. I don't see any right now.
Okay.
Well, there's one here, and it is about how priorities are changing in HR tech due to coronavirus.
Yes, it's fascinating, how quickly things are changing, but I will tell you there's a silver lining. Right now, all of the frameworks and the things that we've done and the tools that we've created are really geared towards disruption. And the disruption was, think about it, demographics, struggling to get talent. We've got all of these, skill shortages, people shortages, talent shortages. People are considering workforce experience and workforce transformation. Part of workforce transformation is not only work and workforce, but it's also workplace, right? Do we, everything from a co-located strategy to a distributed workforce. The distributed workforce is really kind of what we had to deal with immediately. What do we do if we had to push our entire workforce out, right? What tools do we need? What do we have? So COVID, the interesting thing about, it's any disruption, right? The people will start to do the transformation when the pain is high. The pain is high. We've just had the mother of all disruptions. But at the end of the day, these tools are the same. Right now, I see that there's a little bit more of an express lane that we need. And so the conversation with companies has been, what do we, oh my gosh, we have to transform right now. And so, this really becomes, how do we create goals and rethink work right now? Because that's what that framework calls for. Simplifying work. How do we make this easier for people to do? And so, the advice we've been kind of giving people is, it's good to keep that North Star, that target, and think for next normal, but new normal. And what you have to do right now is really about giving people creativity, flexibility, and empowering them to figure out how to do the work by giving them, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, you know, uh, what fast goals, right? Like, what do we, what needs to get done? When do people need to do it? And why do they need to do it? And let them connect to the work in that way, and let them figure out how. Let them figure out how, and take note and listen and watch and ask and figure out, what information do people need? What do they need to provide? And what tools do they need? Do they have the tools that they need to do that work? And listen. All of these frameworks and these blueprints make that conversation a whole lot easier when you can look at your entire, architecture and realize, okay, we do have systems that can do that. Maybe they're not the best. Let's deploy these right now, and then let's listen. Does it help them get what they need to get done, when they need to get it done, and why they need to get it done in the best way possible? And as long as we're giving people that freedom and that empowerment to figure out the how, you can start to take note of these things. It's almost like iterations on the fly, right? You're prototyping as you go. It might fast track the transformation that needed to happen anyway.
Awesome. We may have time for one more question, and it is, what complexities are most HR functions experiencing with HR core?
I definitely think the biggest complexity is around whether it's data flows, what's coming in and what's going out. Part of the complexity is they've not kind of done the design and simplification around their data structures. What data is really important? Is it all 300 fields that we're capturing, right? And where are we getting them, and how we're getting them, and how we get that information out? We're spreading a lot of data and not a lot of insights. So, that kind of design and simplification around work architecture, job architecture, data architecture, so that the systems don't reflect the complexities that we haven't changed. All those complementary transformational activities we should have been doing all along when we were bringing in the tech, but we just kind of lifted and shifted all of that. And so those core systems, and I say systems because many organizations have more than one, have created a lot of the complexities, and certainly the information coming in and coming out and how those systems integrate and talk to each other. That's probably the biggest thing that we're seeing right now that's making work harder, even in this disruption, right? What is actually necessary? So our second findings article that comes out next month is very, very focused on that exact thing.